back, everyone, to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. Thank you for tuning in wherever and however you are tuning in with us today. Like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff that everybody asks you to every time you listen to any sort of content on podcast or YouTube. We're going to ask you to do the same thing. My name is Caleb Talley. I'm a proud member of the Startup Junkie team. I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff Amerine. How's it going, Jeff?
It's great. It's March Madness, and the Hogs made it to the Sweet 16. How bad could it be?
It can't get any better than that, except for a win. And then I don't know if anybody's watching the World Baseball Classic. Team USA is in the championship tonight.
We spanked Cuba, didn't we? We beat the commies down, I think.
We walloped them, taking on Japan tonight, so it should be interesting.
In fact, we beat them so hard, one of their team members defected.
I'm not surprised. We are excited to be joined today by Josh Duntz and Tyler Dunbar. Josh is the president at Metova. Tyler is the president at Central Standard. Let them kind of talk a little bit more about that. But first off, welcome to the show, guys. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having us.
Good. Yeah, thanks for being here. Great to have you.
Well, guys, who wants to jump in first and give us the Wolverine version of your origin story?
Ooh, Wolverines, huh? Josh, you want it?
Sure. Yeah. I feel like we have a pretty similar story, so that might be interesting too. But Tyler and I actually served together in the Navy for about a decade. That's where we previously know each other. And then kind of our relationship moved on to Josh's world and his two companies that he runs, and I introduced Josh to Tyler, and he ended up hiring him. And I came on recently after he hired Tyler at CST to come over to Metova. I can talk. So my background, once I got out of the Navy, got into kind of the SaaS world of technology. So did SaaS sales for a little bit, ended up running some sales teams in that space. And then that's actually how I met Josh. He was a customer of mine at one of my previous companies, and we kind of just stayed in touch for about a year, and then ended up coming over and working for him at Metova. So I'll let Tyler jump in and tell his origin story.
So Josh and I, when did we meet, man? Like 2013?
Probably, yeah, somewhere around there,
yeah. So then we separated and kind of transitioned around the same times of our lives, and we ended up in different areas. So Josh, like you said, he went into tech sales, and I went into managing a dental group, which is vastly different than disarming bombs, which is what we had done prior together. But also super similar in different weird ways, right? So I got the opportunity to manage a dental group inside of COVID, which was a really challenging period probably for everyone across the US, particularly in healthcare. And I kind of got re-energized with building effective teams and seeing like how amazing people can be for your organization, just through inspiration and motivation. So I had finally settled in and embraced myself as a forever leader of a dental group. And I got a phone call from Josh Johnson, said, "Hey, you got to meet this guy named Josh Smith." And I said, "I'm good. No, thanks, man." And he said, "You just do it." So I did. And I talked with Josh Smith, and it sounds like, Jeff, you're buddies with him, so you already know, but just a really nice guy, shared a lot of the same values, and had a great opportunity to join the Central Standard team shortly after. And now all I get to do is focus on building incredible teams. So very happy and thankful to be here.
Well, before we go any farther, were you guys both EOD?
Yeah, we actually were on the same team together for a little bit in the Navy.
And were you divers as well as part of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No kidding. Well, so I'm going to throw a name out there, and if I see you guys shake, I'll understand why. There was a guy I went to the Naval Academy with named Jeff Trumbor, class of 82. Is that a name you recognize at all? Trumbor? He's an old guy, so he would have probably been out long before you guys got in there. He was the kind of guy you'd want in dive, salvage, and EOD. He never met somebody that wasn't an SOB. And I can remember when I was kind of bebopping along as a freshman when we were in formation, and he told me, "Mr. Amerine, your stuff is definitely not all in one sock." He was from Jersey. And I don't think he ever had anybody that he was ever close friends with, but he would be the kind of guy you'd want to be have backing you up in a bar fight. Anyway, Navy stories are over, but I know what you guys do is pretty taxing. So thank you for being on the pointy edge of the spear, so to speak. That's great stuff.
Yeah, I think I'd probably speak for both of us. We probably had a lot more fun doing it than people think as far as taxing goes. I enjoyed our side way more.
I understand. Well, after that, then you transition and you're working in managing a dental practice. Was there any kind of emotional letdown, or how'd you make that transition?
Yeah, so I mean, I had a career kind of set in place, and then COVID happened, right? So everyone froze, their job hirings and all these well-laid plans kind of just crumbled beneath me. And it was through a personal network and the value of relationships. Again, we keep coming back to the value of relationships, right? That kind of opened that opportunity, and it ended up being a total blessing and a really cool adventure that I never would have accepted on face value had COVID not happened, right? So it was amazing. I enjoyed my time. And now obviously it's rolled in and kind of relit the fire for team building that I do now.
That's excellent. And Josh, how about you? How was that transition from this sort of esprit de corps you have in the military, particularly in a really interesting operating unit like what you were in, to the civilian side?
Yeah, it was really challenging for me. I got out in December of 2019, so literally a couple months before the pandemic started. So it was, there was a lot of stuff going on in the world at the time. I had a lot of personal stuff going on and was trying to really, find myself and figure out what is that next big mission that I'm going to go and try to accomplish. I was lucky in the fact that I got to take advantage of a ton of resources, new resources that the military and then some nonprofits make available for people to help them transition out. And there's some specifically for people interested in getting in technology. And then I ended up finding actually going to work for another person that I knew from the military, also a Navy EOD officer who had gotten out a couple years before me and started his own tech startup, where we had basically built this, software service for companies that wanted to hire military veterans. So that was my first kind of introduction into the civilian world. So it was an easier transition for me. I got to work with a bunch of other veterans. It was a mission that I was super passionate about, trying to help people transition, get them jobs into tech, and kind of really what Tyler said, show and deliver the soft skills that veterans bring to the organization. There's a lot of times where we don't have those maybe hard requirements or some of those more technical skills that people are looking for. But a lot of the times those things can be taught and learned pretty easily if you have someone that's competent and kind of hungry to do that. So that was a really cool mission for me to do, and kind of expand the awareness around what veterans can bring into these, early stage startups where they need that hunger, grit. The soft skills, arguably, I think, are more important for a lot of the roles. So it was a pretty cool transition for me.
Well, that's great. Caleb, jump in there. I could tell war stories with these guys all afternoon.
I think that's what people would want to hear, honestly. So speaking of, you talk about kind of helping place veterans into those roles, despite the fact that they don't have the the certificate or whatever it is, they've got these soft skills. What did y'all take away from your time in service that's applicable to your present day success and kind of what you're doing now and kind of your ascension to that?
Yeah, right on. So for me, it was really leading with action, right? So the military is this really cool proving grounds that you always have an opportunity to test yourself and everyone around you, and really kind of get a level set idea of where you stand, right? I think for so much of our life, we have people telling us what we're worth or what we're good at or what we're not good at. And the military is a really cool opportunity to kind of test those theories, right? Because you have a guy like Josh, who's from Florida, I'm from California, made tons of friends with people in Alabama and Arkansas and Texas and North Dakota. And we're all coming together to accomplish the same thing with vastly different experiences prior to that point, and then collaborating on things and figuring it out when we're super under-resourced or we don't have enough time to plan the way that we would like to plan, right? So we create multiple plans and we just say, hey, let's start going and see where we end up. So I think that's something that you get in the military that, it's probably pretty difficult elsewhere just because of risk aversion, or at least from my perception now coming into the civilian world, there's a lot of risk aversion in making decisions or taking action. But at the same time, there's less constraints, it's a weird thing, right? So there's less constraints that allow you to take risks in the civilian world from my seat, but less people are willing to do it. And in the military, there's a lot more built-in, de-riskers, but you have to kind of circumvent those things to accomplish what you need to get accomplished. So kind of balancing it out for me, that's one of the biggest, takeaways from military service.
That's great. Josh, what about you?
Yeah, for me, I guess that the top things that come to mind right away are, super basic stuff. One is communicating with a bunch of different types of people, diverse backgrounds, organizations, foreign military leaders. And I think why that's effective and important when you come to business is because, there would be times where Tyler and I would be responsible where you're going into a brief and you're going to brief an admiral, the highest food chain, right? And then 10 minutes later, you kind of have to take that same brief and be able to communicate it with like an E3 or E4. The strategies and the way that you communicate those two things completely different, even though it's the same content. So I think that's super applicable to like what you have to do in business, depending on, if you're giving briefs to executive or kind of doing a pitch, vice if you're pitching, Joe Schmo from the HR department, same content, but probably likely different delivery method and kind of how you're actually communicating those things. So I found that to be super relevant. And then the other thing that I took away that I feel like I see a lot of lack of people doing this in the business world is really, from a leadership perspective, having that open communication or flow of thoughts and ideas from your entire team, right? So like in the military, we would always do after every mission, like an after action report, right? Where everyone on the team, no matter your seniority or rank was on your collar, like you had your chance to come in and speak your voice of what you thought went really well, what you thought went bad. And, here's my recommendations of how we fix or kind of mitigate problems we came into. I approach leadership the same way in, business now, where it's like, I don't care if you're the lowest man on the totem pole or the CEO of the company. Like, I believe that before decisions should be made, everyone should be able to voice their opinion, and kind of at least let's hear you out. Because a lot of the times the people that are lower, in the hierarchy, are the ones actually on the ground doing the work, and they're the ones having the conversations with the clients, and they really know what's going on a minute by minute basis in the business. Whereas I'm not on all those calls, right? So I don't, I kind of have that macro level view, but it's super helpful if I might get some insights that I didn't think about when I was developing the strategy or something like that. And I feel like a lot of leaders, I don't know if it's like an ego thing or they just think they have the right ideas, or they're just blind to the fact of like how much value their team can bring before making decisions. So those are kind of the two things that come to mind for me.
That's a super good insight, because one of the things we used to talk about, and I'm old enough to be a Cold War, is how we would prevail against our adversaries in those days. Was in the US, since the time of the Minuteman, it was all about centralized planning and decentralized execution, meaning, as you just kind of described, you're going to take the initiative absent orders to the contrary. Whereas we used to joke that in those days, the Kremlin, Brezhnev, whoever the supreme leader was, he could get on the horn and tell the entire fleet to turn a certain direction, and on an instant they would. But if they faced ambiguity or chaos, they weren't real good at dealing with it. Whereas US military is. And I think that idea of small units and getting feedback from the people that are on the line, the regardless of position, that's only something that differentiates American entrepreneurs from others. If you see other areas that are less innovative, it's also something you see in places like Israel, where they have very similar approach to it, where somebody that is brand new into the military can have a very direct conversation with senior leadership because they want that kind of feedback. That flat organization So that's really an interesting insight. And I think it's essential to fast and agile organizations like what both of you guys are running. So talk a little bit about how Central and Metova interact. I mean, you're separate organizations. You've got a common element in Josh Smith, who will say lots of nice things about for bringing you guys together. But talk a little bit about how the two organizations work together.
Yeah, so I'll speak from my side. I think the Metova CST connection is pretty incredible and very powerful when utilized the right way, according to Tyler. So it gives you the opportunity as a company to do a couple of really great things, right? On one side, we can augment your staff and help you build out a really incredible team because you have the technical proficiency already in place. And then there's a section of people who are in the startup community or maybe a more established late stage company with more traditional mindset that realizes, hey, we need to do better, but I don't necessarily know how to do better because that's not like my experience and expertise. And they can go to a Metova and say, hey, this is what I think I need. And Metova provides strategy plus augmentation. And then on the end of the life cycle, you can then take CST and not lose any of that information in the build of whatever product that they built. So it's a unique relationship because it's really a life cycle thing, right? From start all the way to end, and even into handoff, that I'm not sure many other companies that I'm aware of at least have the ability to provide.
And one other question for you, Tyler. I mean, the whole theory behind what you're doing at Central is the fact that you've got people, regardless of if they're outside the country, that are in time zones where you don't have to worry about it being 8 or 12 hours offset, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the huge thing with time zone advantage, right? And all of those things Josh was just talking about, and having that collaboration in real time is so powerful in the creative space, as you guys probably know doing this podcast, right? Not having that delay and the ability to make changes and create in real time is super powerful. So my company focuses primarily building teams out of Mexico and plugging them in with US companies. But we also source Latin America as a whole. But yes, under that premise that culturally we're very similar, we have a huge time zone advantage. And then we also have a production advantage because in Mexico, for example, they work 48 hours versus 40. So who cares? We love Americans. We're only going to work with Americans. That's awesome. And we love that too. We're very pro-American at the same time. But for a decade, we've had smaller, I call them Southwest cities, right? I'm from a smaller community, 100,000 people. The heartland, there's cities like this all over, right? Incredible entrepreneurs, incredible ideas, no access to the talent that they need to take their vision to the next level. So that's really where we step in, is to provide a cost-effective solution to help build out an incredible team, because we don't believe that you should pay San Francisco prices or New York prices or have to deal with a 12-hour time delay, because that's just something that could kill a project before it even really gets started.
No, that's great. And Josh, from the Metova side, talk about, from your perspective, what kind of agility and flexibility it gives you to work with Central.
Yeah. One, it's just awesome, like being in having the opportunity to work with Tyler again on such a close level. That's been amazing, and something that from a community standpoint, I know we both missed after getting out of the military, is you kind of, lose those brothers and sisters that you had. So that's been awesome. But yeah, just to kind of caveat on what he said, I think it just gives us really a huge advantage on speed, right? So the ability to get resources a lot faster than some of our clients would be capable of. Most of the time they don't have a dedicated, kind of outsourcing talent acquisition strategy or full-time employees in place anyways. And then, like Tyler said, it gives us flexibility for the client, whether they're looking to have Metova be kind of their full-time technology partner throughout their life cycle as a company, or if they're looking at a strategy like, hey, we want to build our MVP with you, Metova, but then eventually we'd like to move into having our own full-time dedicated resources. We can kind of start supplementing our team with Tyler's team that he allocates, and then slowly over time start to kind of dedicate more and more of that project to full-time employees that Tyler's resourcing for those companies. So eventually it's just a much smoother transition for them. None of the technology gets lost, none of the project management or kind of, those key aspects that you need that from the developers that are actually working on the product on a day-to-day basis. And then the other advantage that they have is they always have Metova for that internal kind of research and strategy piece that they can supplement with their full-time team if they choose to go that way. So it's been pretty cool to see that come to fruition.
Caleb, jump in there.
Yeah, and Tyler, you mentioned not having to pay Silicon Valley prices. Kind of what advantage do y'all have kind of leveraging that developmental talent out of Mexico versus San Francisco as it relates to offering that as a service, a cost-effective service to clients?
Yeah, so I say rule of thumb is we'll save you 30 to 50% in cost, all in, right? And for somebody who's in any sort of startup, there's another critical element to that is you also don't have to give any of your company away to get really high quality talent, right? And so that's the other piece of conversations that I have is you have these startup leaders that, they've got really a great thing going and they know it's going to be great, but they don't want to give 5% of the company away on somebody to come in that they really don't know. They think it's going to be great. They think it's going to go perfect, but maybe Tyler's not a good fit for the company, right? And now I've given this person 5% of my company, and it gives you a lot of flexibility and kind of works around some of those other issues that I think, for example, the Silicon Valley, there's a lot more of those issues happening.
For sure. And you're able to find high quality, in many
absolutely.
instances, advanced degrees and lots of experience from the pool that you're recruiting folks from, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of our focus, right? There's most people that think, and myself included prior to joining this, is like you have a certain mindset of what outsourcing looks like, right? And typically for most people, it's not high quality, right? So that's a piece that looks really different for us. We focus on hiring people long-term, custom solution, building for a team just for you. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to really focus on high quality technical talent that then is retained over time, right? So rather than fill 50 really low level positions, we really try to focus on those senior and mid-level positions that establish and create value for years and years to come.
And you're able to get folks with really solid English skills as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not perfect English, but they speak really good English conversationally. Our headquarters is in Guadalajara. I just got back a couple of weeks ago. And all the conversations I have are in English. Our team meetings are all in English. So they're very good at a very good level for English.
So I've got a question for both of you guys. We've all seen recently, the last few years, the rise of artificial intelligence, machine learning, auto ML, been popularized recently with the coverage on 60 Minutes and CBS Sunday Morning, and it's sort of democratized the access that everybody has to things like ChatGPT and the OpenAI in general, Talley, all that stuff. How do you guys see that? Do you see it as competitive threat to what you're doing, or a force multiplier, or something in between?
Yeah. So I think long term, it's definitely, I would say, a competitor. I think eventually, AI will get to a level where it's probably capable of, doing projects as a developer is today. I still think we're quite far out from that. And I think it lacks a lot of the nuance that an actual human brings to creative projects and, being able to communicate with the end user and the project stakeholders and all that. Right now, I think it's a great way to supplement, the dev work, building MVPs, getting stuff, into users' hands much faster than you could have before, or building, SDKs if you're going to use the same type of code over and over again for different projects, stuff like that. And that we're seeing a lot of, obviously from the market, like clients implementing it to increase, customer service or build chat bots on top of their website and stuff like that. So I think from that aspect, that technology will just continue to provide a better experience for us, the end users and the consumers, which is super cool to see. But I still think there's also a lot of unknowns with that technology. And it seems from even the people that are building it don't exactly know what is going to happen next, which is a little concerning. But I mean, I guess, we've kind of opened up that can of worms, and it seems like it might be a little too late to put the lid back on. So I think we're in it for the ride now.
Yeah. They're talking about the singularity in 2029, whatever the singularity means. But if you really want to get freaked out, ask Talley, which is this thing that will do text to art, to do art in the form of pick your artist of what the moment the singularity occurs. And it gives some pretty frightening images. I'll be real honest with you. I've been playing around with it. It's pretty scary. But anyway, should be fun. Tyler, what do you think? What's your take on?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you guys are talking about. I'm a huge technology as a tool perspective guy, humans over hardware, at least for the foreseeable future. From my standpoint, it's definitely going to add, efficiency in, but I think you still need humans to be effective, right? And there's a difference between being effective and being efficient. I think AI is probably really efficient, but like Josh was talking about, how effective is it without those little human elements of nuance in between? So.
Yeah, we've already started to use it a lot for sales stuff, to create cold email templates or, even LinkedIn posts and stuff like that. And it gives you a pretty good template. And the more you play around with it and you kind of learn specific verbs, you can get kind of higher quality output from it. But like Tyler said, it still needs human input in order to deliver those results. I think the real interesting situation is once it can kind of deliver that on its own without human input is when maybe we all need to start asking if we're going to have a job much longer.
I'm going to be thinking a lot more then.
Yeah, that's when you start thinking, well, maybe it's not too late to get a plumbing certificate or learn how to do electrical work, because some of that stuff is still a ways off for robots and AI.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those trade jobs are looking a lot more shiny now.
Sure, for sure.
So the fear of that a little bit further off, looking at kind of the landscape of the economy right now, what's going on with the banks and just kind of the tech sector, what keeps y'all up at night?
I can jump in first. So, I mean, definitely the collapse of SVB was a huge one for us, just because a lot of our clients are early stage startups. So that was kind of, a huge thing that we had to go and tackle and see who, if any of our clients were going to be affected by that. We all saw the outcome of that. So it hasn't turned into as big as a deal as I think people initially thought. But yeah, so moving into the rest of the year, that's a huge concern of mine, is just, as the economy and if we move into this recession, what is that going to do to the venture capital market? And then how does that obviously affect early stage startups from being able to raise money? Because we rely on a lot of them to, fund some of their early stage MVPs and stuff like that. So I would say just the broader economy at large is kind of, something I'm keeping an eye on quite closely the next couple of quarters.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I'm seeing is fear is paralyzing a lot of people. So some people look at this and, they just hit freeze or they hit cut. And then you've got a second section of people who go, this is amazing. This is a huge opportunity. Never in my life I might be in this position that I'm in now to grow bigger under these circumstances. So I think they're kind of battling. I think most people probably fall under the fear and paralyzation side right now, if we're being honest, right? And being very conservative, which is good because the rules of money are changing, right? Money's not free anymore. It's getting more expensive. What does that look like? Trying to predict and financially model that out to the future, to sustain and support some of these growth initiatives is obviously a scary thing, especially if you're a startup and you are heavily leveraged. But yeah, most of the fear, this kind of stuff gets me excited because there's a right section of people out there who this is going to be the best thing that ever happened for them. And they're going to use this as a giant opportunity to land the talent that they never had access to, or to talk to the guy who refused to talk to them, 6 months ago, or whatever that looks like. And so for as much fear as there is out there, I think there's a whole heap of opportunity. So I'm actually really excited about that piece.
Yeah, I think you guys, your read on it is close to where I am with it as well, in that it seems like it's going to take even more of the froth off valuations in some instances. Some of these valuations were unsustainable and ridiculous, and you always see that in a boom cycle. But the other piece that it takes away until somebody fills that gap is, a lot of times, as you guys know, when they're raising equity, there's that venture debt that comes along with it, which is what Silicon Valley Bank was sort of the market leader in.
Right.
To some extent, providing that debt burden, and it's typically high interest and there's warrants associated, it's a lot of burden on the company. It adds even more pain and suffering to a founder that's trying to grow into a valuation or trying to hit growth metrics. Sure. So I kind of wonder if, without killing innovation, this is going to expose some of the posers and the people that were getting frothy valuations that didn't really make a lot of sense. And the strong companies will get stronger, and the good ideas will shine even more so. And fundamental economics are going to be required again, versus sort of growth at all cost. And, I think the venture treadmill can be pathological sometimes in terms of what it does to businesses. It pushes founders to exit too early, or to be forced to exit too early, or to make decisions that optimize an immediate turn versus a long-term value that the company can realize. And I'm saying that as somebody that runs a venture capital fund, but I think this may be a healthy thing in the long run. Just back to basics, more fundamental focus, I think will be good.
Yeah, for sure. I think companies got away with that for far too long, of just growth at all costs. Not paying attention to what their unit economics were, even the business model. It was just like, okay, how do we acquire as many users as possible? We'll figure out how to actually make money later, which, worked for some companies, but the vast majority that you don't hear about, it didn't work out for. So I feel like this is like a good reset, where it's like, as a founder, you now have to focus on building an actual good company from the beginning, not I'm going to figure it out once I've raised $100 million, So I think there's a lot of good things that came out of this as well.
Yes, one way we like to land the plane, so to speak, on the podcast is to ask our guests, if they had the opportunity to go back in time, maybe before you joined the service, or before you started your the professional path you're on now. You had the opportunity to go back in time and give your younger self advice with all the accumulated knowledge you have now, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, my biggest one would be, don't let others establish your value, right? And I talked a little bit about that earlier, but depending on who you are and where you came from, people can tell you from a very early age what you're worth. And I think that's a really dangerous thing if you're in a negative feedback loop, because it's probably not true. And there's a section of people and relationships that value you, and they don't know what it is about you, but they know something's great, right? And we tend to kind of push those people away, and we focus on the people who think that, we're worth nothing, or we're not good at something. And we spend all of our time trying to convince that person, hey, no, you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong, instead of focusing that energy and time and effort into that person who really loves you and cares about you, or thinks you're going to do something amazing, but doesn't really know what. And so I would encourage myself to identify that early, and don't worry about the people who don't believe in you or don't understand. They never will, or probably never will. But the people who do love and care for you, they're going to be there forever. And relationships are the most valuable asset anyone possesses. So to continue to grow those valuable relationships.
Good stuff, yeah. Josh. How about you?
For me, I think in high growth technology companies, I think there's kind of two buckets that really valuable contributors fall into. They either are selling the product or building the product, and then everyone else kind of supports those two organizations. I've got a chance to see what it looks like to sell a product and be on the go-to-market teams. So I think going back, I would focus on building my weak skill set and actually building product. I would love to learn how to code, or do UX, UI work, design work, stuff like that. It's something I'm super interested in. I just don't have a ton of time to like dedicate towards actually like developing those skills. If I could go back like middle school, high school, I would definitely start to get into coding and learn how to code. And I think that would be what I would tell my younger self. And then I would have both sets of skills and be even more dangerous, I feel like.
Well, speaking of danger, before we leave this, I can't get out of this podcast with asking you both how you found yourself in EOD. Talk about what that path was like. I'm really, not a lot of people who may be listening to this or watching and have seen Hurt Locker, so they have some idea from the perspective of what it's like to disarm IEDs and that kind of stuff, but they probably don't have any idea about that career field in the Navy. How did you find your way into it? Give us a little bit of that.
Go for it, Josh.
Okay. So my story probably isn't that cool. I graduated high school. I went to college, or I went to a semester of college, and quickly figured out that college life was not right for me at 19 years old. So dropped out, moved back home. And I was basically like, I had to get out of the house. And one of my buddies had just joined the Navy. So I went to the recruiter's office. Originally, like my childhood dream of like some of my cousins and I was actually to become like Blue Angel pilots. We grew up in Pensacola, like going to the Blue Angel shows. So I originally, like I had walked in with the intention of like, I was like, I want to be a fighter pilot, man. And this recruiter like started laughing basically in my face and kind of told me like what it takes to like go down that path. And step one was going back to college. So I was like, all right, I don't want to be a fighter pilot anymore. What other cool jobs are there? I don't want to be like on a boat, So I think he handed me like pamphlets on SEALs, EOD, diver, and then rescue swimmer. And I went home and basically, started doing some research and due diligence on what interested me, and ended up landing on EOD because we got to do a little bit of everything. We got to shoot, we got to jump, we got to dive, we got to blow stuff up. Growing up, I was very much like always into something, and then I would move on and kind of, I played every sport, wanted to do everything. So I was like, all right, this is cool. Like I don't have to become we always say like a master at none, we're really good at everything. So that's kind of like what led me down that path.
Very cool. Tyler, what about you?
Man, that was deep, JD. Everyone's gonna laugh at my story now. So I was in the Fleet Navy. I was actually in the technology career field at the time, and it was like Friday morning. It must have been, I don't know. I got to work way too early that day, and I'm wearing this like stupid yellow jersey for my workout gear. And I've got this really like stupid high and tight haircut, and we're like driving back from working out, and I look over and like there's this gated compound, and I see guys like laughing, right? And they've got like normal people clothes on, and they've got longer hair, and one guy's on the barbecue like grilling, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? How did I end up here and that guy ended up there, right? So within a matter of weeks, I decided it was time for a career change. And I went and I talked with the SEALs, and I talked with the EOD guys and the divers. I never talked to the SWIC guys. But then I kind of figured out like, where do I fit? And I really fit in with the EOD guys, and kind of like the intelligent athlete mindset, right? And then they hazed me going in, right? And there was just like a lot of power and love there. Right. They brought me in and they just destroyed me for weeks and weeks on end. But then, I went to school and I felt like I was already part of the team. So awesome. To me, that was what really attracted me to EOD. It was long hair and barbecues on Fridays.
That's awesome. Very good. Well, good stuff, guys. And so if our audience wants to find out more about Metova or Central, what's the best way for them to do that?
Metova is just metova.com. So go to our website, find us on LinkedIn. Feel free to hit me up if you have any questions or concerns about anything. And then Tyler.
Yeah, same, centralstandard.com. And then, best way to reach out to me is on LinkedIn, Tyler Dunbar. There's pictures there, so you can't miss that. Just reach out to me directly. Feel free to message me, or you can reach out and find my contact on our website as well.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming on. We may have to have a podcast just dedicated to mostly true war stories at some point in the future. But I really
I love
appreciate you guys coming on. This was great.
We'll
Yeah,
call
for
it.
sure.
We'll call it super disappointing and not what you think it should be. That was
Things that never really happened that I told people that did, right?
not as
All
sexy
right.
as you thought it was.
Exactly. All right, guys. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Take care,
thanks for
guys.
having us.
Yeah.
Take care.
See you guys.
Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors. If you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit. What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100,000 downloads. If you're interested in reaching some of the most motivated and engaged innovators and entrepreneurs on a worldwide basis, give us a shout.